Hello lovelies. I've alluded in the past to the idea that I think I've worked out what's wrong with everything. And it seems like an arrogant assumption, but the problem is faith. Before we really get into that, I should set some boundaries of the terms and what I mean. I don't mean faith as in trust, right? You have faith in your friends to do X, Y, or Z, right? That's a matter of trust. Okay, and in many ways that's an experiment. You extend trust to a person, see how they respond to the trust that you put in them, and then according to how they happen to act, you know whether to continue to trust them in the future. That's not the kind of faith I'm talking about. And I'm not just talking about religious faith, though religious faith is almost 100% of the time of the kind of thing that I'm talking about. I also don't mean faith where some people misuse it to mean a justified belief, right? So you don't actually have faith in gravity because, it works, right? So you don't have faith in it. You have a justified belief in it. Terminology is important. Semantics are important. If we don't agree on the meaning of terms, then we can't communicate. So for the duration of this video, understand that what I mean by faith is unjustified, ungrounded, absolute, unshakable, usually, often, belief in something, right? That might be a god. There is no evidence for a god whatsoever, any god, right? But many people believe, and they make a virtue of faith, of believing that there is a god with no actual reason to do so. At least no rational reason. There can be plenty of emotional reasons. Feeling that you need the support, the pressure of your family, fear of being ostracized by your community, all that kind of thing. Some of those border on the rational, but not as rational reasons to believe, but only to act like you believe. But it's not just religion. It's just most people grok what I'm saying if I say it about religion or superstition or magic or whatever else. You understand what I mean if I say faith in that context. You understand that it means unjustified belief. But people do not only invest faith in religion. People also invest faith in ideology or economics or whatever else you care to mention. A lot of people invest faith, belief without evidence, unjustified belief in a lot of moral systems, ethical systems, economic systems, or whatever else. So what I'm saying is that faith, unjustified, unsupported, absolute belief in anything is incredibly dangerous, including anything that comes out of my mouth, right? And not having faith. There will be exceptions. You should extend trust to your friends and so on, even before they've proven themselves to you, right? Otherwise you can't find out. Yeah? So let's look at some examples, and I know some of you will react violently to some of these examples, but try and see the point behind the specifics, right? And I will try and navigate this as best I can. Take Brexit as a UK example. Many Brexiteers have faith that this is somehow a good thing, and they cannot be turned aside from their viewpoint by evidence, all of which is against the idea that this will be a good thing. But it's not a rational decision on the part of the hardcore, maybe a third of the voters, right? It's an emotional issue. It doesn't matter that the specifics, even of the things that get them emotionally incensed, are incorrect, that they're wrong, what the opinion of experts, the Bank of England, the government that was, none of that matters, right? They just have this feeling and they believe absolutely that it's the right thing to do. And furthermore, they believe in belief, in that the problem is that more people don't believe in Brexit, and if they did, somehow magically that would solve all the issues. And so they're immune to reason, unwilling to compromise, unwilling to do anything. Right? There's just no solution to that problem with that hardcore of people. So let's try and be fair on the Brexit issue and look at the other side, shall we? Okay, so I'm a Remainer, but I consider my opinion to be a rational one, not based on emotion. But there are emotional aspects to it as well. But there are plenty of people who are ardently pro-Remain. I have no idea what number, because it's not that easy to figure out who is of this position. There are a hardcore of people that believe the European Union is somehow perfect. It doesn't need changing in any way. It's fine just as it is. There aren't genuine issues that need to be addressed. That's just as much of a faith position as the other. I mean, I can look at the EU, and even though it's more democratic than the UK, I can say, well, I would like the EU to be more democratic. I would like it to be more accountable. I would like the directly rather than indirectly elected figures within it to hold more power, have more sway, and so on. I wish it would be a little bit more flexible in the way it treats some of the countries. I wish it would be a bit more strenuous with the way it treats some of the countries involved, like Hungary, for example. So there's plenty of things I can look at in the EU, and I can say, well, this isn't terribly good. This isn't great. There's a lot of bureaucracy here. There's a lot of needless fiddle-faddling. But overall, I can look at it and say, overall, this is a good thing. But it's not a faith-based position, right? But there are people who are faith-based on that. Similarly, we can look to the United States, and you've got the people who are against Trump on the matter of, on a faith basis, and the people who are for Trump on a faith basis. The people who are for Trump, somehow, many of them, American politics always gets tangled up in Christianity, believe he is somehow the chosen one, and Trump plays up to that, the King of Israel and whatever else. But he's done a lot that, if not immediately, will in the near future come around to bite his voter base on the arse, not dissimilar to Brexit. He's blown a massive hole in the US economy. He started trade wars that are going to cause all sorts of problems for American consumers and producers, for that matter. The tax differences aren't going to help his voter base. They're going to help the rich, which would include Trump. Yeah, and the list goes on and on and on. All right, but they ignore all that, or they make excuses for that. They'll find some way to avoid having to face up to that. And then on the other side, you've got people who will refuse to accept that Trump can do anything good, however accidentally that might be, like forgiving debt for disabled veterans on their student loans and things. Yeah, I think any rational person can look at that and say that's a good thing, even if it's rooted in the American sickness of patriotism and military worship, and kind of doesn't exactly deflate the fascism accusations aimed at Trump. But we can still say, look, people benefit. It's an example of positive government largesse. It's helped a whole bunch of people who I think everyone would say are deserving in one way or another, whether they think it's because of their service or whether they think it's because of their disability, whatever else. We can point to that and say Trump did something good, however much we feel about the guy, right? In whatever way we feel about the guy, he is capable, at least, of doing something good. Okay, so that's a couple of specifics, right? And you can see faith at work on both sides. But more generally, I think we can look at political ideologies. Capitalism is not perfect, nor do I think it is the best solution we can come up with, at least not in its rawer, more laissez-faire incarnations, right? But there are people who are absolutely faithful to the idea of completely unfettered capitalism, even though we know it doesn't work, right? I mean, we may not have ever tried full, absolutely free market capitalism, but when we relax controls and watchdogs and so on, things go awry. And the looser we have the markets, the more things go awry. But then also the other direction, the more controlling, the more planned economy we go, then that starts to cause problems. But there's some kind of happy middle ground between the two, which I think is more towards the left economics than the right economics. But yeah, it's a middle ground, whichever pole you're coming at it from, unless you're a member of the libertarian faithful, genuflecting to the invisible hand of the market every day. But that's an extreme kind of anarcho-capitalist position, which doesn't work, right? And then you've got the Marxists, the communists. They have absolute faith in communism, even though it has never successfully been achieved or tried, right? Well, Marxism has. Communism hasn't, except on very small scale, kibbutzes, communes, things like that, which do work quite well. But it doesn't seem to scale. Why? Well, in the midst of a Marxist revolution and the reorganization of society, there is this vulnerable point where everything is brought into the control of the government, and that makes it extremely vulnerable to unscrupulous individuals, whether it be Stalin or Kim Jong-un or Mao or whoever else. There is this point where everything is under the control of the government, and so one person rises, brutally takes over, and becomes the sole power in the government, and thereby the sole power in the country, and therefore that state ownership of everything, the government never withers away to become communism. And yet they keep trying, and they keep trying, and they keep trying, and it hasn't ever really developed beyond that failing. And they have absolute faith in that. So there's another two more general examples, right? We should always be skeptical, but we should always also leave a gap, a chance for new ideas to penetrate, to be examined. We shouldn't necessarily dismiss everything outright. And that analytical approach itself, you shouldn't put absolute faith in that, because human beings are not necessarily particularly rational. This is something I struggle with, right? My own mental issues, my main coping mechanism that has ever really worked for me in relation to being shot away has been to detach, step back, take an analytical, procedural point of view on how to do things. And this can make me seem cold and aloof. Sometimes it doesn't take into account people's feelings, because I tend to place the truth and the process and the ethical structure above the feelings of individuals, which is fine at a societal scale, right? Or within a system like the judicial system or academia or scientific research or whatever else. But in interpersonal relationships, it fucks me over quite a lot, to be honest. It's something I'm trying to change, to relax that sense of wanting control over everything in my life and wanting to understand and to analyze and to pick over everything. It's something I'm trying to let go, and it's just not very easy. But the overall point here remains the same. We should not have faith in things. We should have belief in things. Belief is justified by evidence, experience, the maths, the science, whatever else. But that means that those edifices upon which that belief is based also need to be maintained and watched and kept to the task, kept to the process. We have a real problem at the moment with science, especially the soft sciences, not being particularly replicable, not being particularly accurate, a lot of it being, frankly, very activist oriented. So they're trying to find evidence that supports a conclusion that they already came to going into the experiment, right? And then you don't get good science that way. But we shouldn't have faith. We shouldn't have absolute trust in anything. But people expect it, right? This is the downside of this. If I declare myself, as I do, I am an anarchist, what does that actually mean, right? It means to me that I want the greatest freedom for the greatest number of people. I want people to be as free as is possible. Now, the idealistic kind of perfect example of that would be everyone being completely free to do whatever they wanted, right? Except it doesn't really work like that, does it? You know, if anyone can do whatever they want, they inevitably impact on each other. But that's the kind of utopian version. But I don't hove to the utopian version. I take what I want, what I need from the principle of anarchism, the idea of the greatest freedom for the greatest number of people, but then I allow it to be filtered through pragmatism. I don't have faith in it. I don't believe that everyone will be shiny and fluffy and happy and nice to each other if we just give them carte blanche to do whatever they want. At least 1 in 100 people in the world is a psychopath, for a start. You know, they don't particularly have empathy. They use other people, and those people would run rampant in such a system. So I temper my idealism with pragmatism, with reality. Okay, so we're going to have to curtail people's freedoms to some extent. What is the minimum amount we can do that and still maintain, you know, as free and open as possible a society? And if we do have to intervene, how can we intervene in such a way as to increase rather than decrease people's freedoms and securities as in so much as is possible? And this gets me called all sorts of things. Not a good anarchist, for example. But I am, because I'm hoving to the ideal, not the utopian version, not the platonic version, because that fails when it meets the real world, as anarcho-capitalism does, as communism does, as all these other things do. But the faithful are unwilling to bend or compromise or revise. That's what makes it faith. And to change a faith normally requires violence and upheaval, which is something else that I would prefer to avoid. So if we want to solve any of these issues in the world, if we want to solve any of these issues in society, in our politics, in our economics, in the interfaces between our religions and our civic societies, the thing we have to work on, the thing we have to eliminate, is faith. Unjustified, insane, delusional belief in anything. Whether it be an ideology, an economic system, a religion, complementary or alternative medicine, doesn't matter. The problem at the absolute core of all of it is faith. Zang.